All right, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Alexander Bogdanovsky and I'll be your moderator for today. This is How to Teach Reproducibility in Classwork. And today you will hear from Dr. Fernando Hoces de la Guardia, who's a project scientist at the Berkeley Initiative for Transparency in the Social Sciences. A few notes on housekeeping before we get started. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions and vote up or tag on other people's questions by placing a comment underneath. We'll be sourcing questions from the Q&A and I will relay them on to Fernando as they come in or as they get voted up. And then if you want to chime in at any point, please just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. You can also just post your questions in the Q&A function. And then finally, you can just use the chat to introduce yourself, comment on the presentation, and interact with other participants. So, Fernando, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you very much, all of you, to join us here today. We're very happy to be talking to you about how to teach transparency in classwork. As I said, my name is Fernando Hoces. I'm a project scientist here at the Berkeley Initiative for Transparency in the Social Sciences at UC Berkeley. And today's presentation is going to be, mainly I'm going to be talking about a project that we have been working on for over a year now. It's called the Accelerating Computation Reproducibility in Economics. We have total an hour, 45 minutes. So, and I can talk about this project for about an hour, but if the conversation gets longer, I want the conversation to go longer on this topic. But if we have more than 20 or 30 minutes left at the end, I have prepared a hands-on practice on computation practices for computational reproducibility, where I can give a short version of a workshop on version control for beginners that we have done for our RT2 workshops at BITSS. Okay. The target audience for today, it's going to be instructors of empirical or applied courses in economics. Think of empirical labor, empirical health, education economics, empirical macro, or things like that. Also advisors of undergraduate students, and also researchers interested in conducting reproductions. So let me tell you about our initiative of accelerating computational reproducibility in economics. For now on, I'll refer as ACRE. For that, I will start by introducing our organization a little bit. We are the Berkeley Initiative for Transparency in the Social Sciences. We work to improve the credibility of science by advancing transparency, reproducibility, rigor, and ethics in research. We are part of the Center for Effective and Global Action at UC Berkeley, and particularly for the ACRE project, here are the names of all the people who have been involved. The PI is Ted Miguel, co-PI is Lars Vilhuber, who also will be giving a talk here later in the day. So before I talk about the ACRE project, I want to motivate it with basically three core motivations around reproducibility. The first motivation has to do with the so-called reproducibility crisis. This is something that most of you have been heard in the last 3 to 5 years, where there has been a good number of studies that have tested the replicability of social sciences. And by replicability here, I'm thinking of the left column, where a group of researchers apply the same experiment with the same method to a different sample. And this has been done mainly in psychology. The famous one is the Open Science Collaboration Initiative. But there have been also some studies in economics at a smaller scale, led by Colin Kammerer and co-authors, where they have found that replicability rate of something between 30 to 60%. Again, this is the idea of same method over a different sample. what we're going to be talking about today has to do with reproduction, that is using the same data, the same methods, ideally the same code, and obtaining exactly the same results as in the paper. And there have been a few studies in economics that have tried to assess this in macroeconomics by Chang and Lee, in empirical micro by Gertler and co-authors, also King and co-authors, and Wu and co-authors. And here, it's important to emphasize that it's the same data, same methods, and hopefully same code. So we could, in theory, aspire to get something closer to 100%. In replication, we should not expect 100% because there could be issues around external validity and implementation. But here we should have something, we could aspire to something closer to 100%, and we are nowhere near that. At the higher end, we're going to have something like 40-something%. On the lower end, we're going to have something like 14%. And the range varies on the amount of time and effort that the reproducers put into the assessment process, and how do they label something as reproducible or not.
Fernando, if I may jump in with a question from one of the registrants.
Yes, please.
So we have Sergis Ngasa asked, does the reproducibility of a study from one space to another question its authenticity? Would you be able to comment on that?
Yes, yeah. So that question basically it's talking about using the term reproducibility, I think, to think about replication, and that's totally fine. I will talk about how these terminologies get mixed up later in a second, but I think that question is thinking about, when it's talking about reproducibility of one space to another, is thinking about repeating the experiment or the study in a different setting. So that would be replication, and that would not necessarily question its validity. It might question the external validity of the study, issues around implementation, and another explanation could be the validity of the study in terms of whether or not it was a false positive or something like that. But that's a very good question. So first motivation, the idea of low reproducibility. Second motivation, and this is something that if you have attend any talk related to transparency, open science, or computational reproducibility, this is a quote that is thrown out there often to talk about the importance of computational reproducibility. It's called the Clarabelle Principle. It's a quote by John Clarabelle, a geophysicist, that in 1995 basically stated that an article about computational reproducibility in a scientific publication is not the scholarship itself, it's merely advertisement, and the actual scholarship is the complete software development environment and set of instructions that generated the figures in that article, and figures and tables. This principle, the Clarabelle Principle, is used frequently to emphasize the potential positive effects of computational reproducibility behind pedagogy. It's easier to teach if you are showing the entire iceberg, not only the top part. It's easier to generate incremental knowledge for people to pick up where others left, if you have access again to the whole thing. But one under-discussed dimension is that this might have some possible positive effects on diversity, equity, and inclusion, in the sense that if the default is that you can access the entire set of instructions, the entire data and the entire code without having to ask anybody, without having to have the proper connections to obtain that data, in a sense, you are reducing the barriers of entry to researchers who don't have the right connections, who don't have the appropriate language skills, appropriate politeness, if you will, to obtain those materials. So that's a second motivation. And a third motivation is there's also a large amount of knowledge that is generated each year around the world. We're not focused only in the US, we're trying to get the attention of research, instructors around the world, where basically students take empirical or applied something in economics course. And a typical assignment consists of reproducing the results of a paper and possibly testing the robustness of its results. And each year that knowledge goes lost. What do I mean by that? Roughly, an exercise is going to have some stages. Like first, the student will, the reproducer will select and verify a paper, and will inspect quickly the paper to see if there is a data and code. And they might discover that some of them have data, some of them don't have data, some of them have code, some of them don't have code. And that knowledge might not go recorded, particularly for the ones that they don't pursue later on. There's also the reproducer will assess in a subjective manner the degree of reproducibility of some parts of the paper. They might improve it. They might fix some paths, add some libraries, missing files. They might make the code more readable. They might add something to the current stage of the materials. And later on, they might test the robustness of these results to additional specifications. And in each of these previous stages, there was valuable new knowledge. That's an important thing that we want to emphasize. This knowledge is not usually disseminated. Why? Because at the end of the semester, there's at the end of the semester, the student either presents this in a what? At the end of the semester, there's the student either is going to present it or going to write a brief report. This report is not going to be standardized across the courses around the world. The language is not going to be standard. As I said, there's not even a clear agreement of what do we mean by reproduction or replication. And there are some current attempts around this, but they are much more targeted towards writing a full paper around a reproduction exercise. And we do think that this is helpful, but it targets a smaller set of exercises, in the sense that many students work on 2 weeks, a month on this type of exercises, and that knowledge we would like to provide a standardized way of recording that without asking them to write a full paper. A result of this is that each new semester, new students have to reinvent the wheel. They need to fix the same paths. They need to figure out how to access the data. They do the same assessments using different languages and things like that. And there's a lost opportunity on building on previous exercises. There's a lost opportunity for aggregating the knowledge generated by the reproducers. So those three motivations: the idea of a reproducibility crisis, the idea of increasing the inclusivity of the research community to access materials, and the idea of preventing the loss of knowledge that motivates the creation of the ACRE guidelines and the ACRE platform. I'll be spending most of the presentation talking about the ACRE guidelines, and because we do have a version by now, and the ACRE platform we're just starting to develop it, and we'll have a beta version soon for people to use. So context for ACRE, as a context, it's important to take into account the American Economic Association in about 15 years ago creates its first data policy, where basically they asked for their, back then I think it was 5 journals, that authors who want to publish in those journals must publish some data, and there were waivers available. In the year 2019, there was a major update to that policy, that now researchers who want to publish in those, I think in the year 2019 was 9 journals of the AAA, they must post all code, all data, and publication is conditional on verifying the reproducibility of results. And if the data is confidential, they must document extensively how to obtain the data and how the data was processed. An important new requirement is that researchers must post all the cleaning code. even if the data is not public. If you want to know more about the changes and the implications for publication in economics, the presentation after this one is going to be from Lars Vilhuber, the American Economic Data Editor, and the person who has been leading these changes in this space. So the one implication of this history is that we should expect high levels of computational reproducibility after the year 2019, at least for the AAA journals. We should not demand 100% of reproducibility before, but we could identify the gaps on reproducibility of what has been published before and try to improve some. And in going towards that exercise, one important thing that we wanted to highlight is that we wanted to have a little bit of we want to move away from binary judgments when talking about these issues, because reproductions can easily gravitate towards adversarial exchanges. Early career researchers, it's important to acknowledge that early career researchers have incentives to emphasize unsuccessful reproductions, in the sense that when they conduct a reproduction and when they find an error or that something is not working, that's much more likely to be published than something that confirms that a paper reproduces well. On the other hand, original authors have a more senior position and can use it to deter in-depth reproductions from early career researchers. So that formula leads to an adversarial exchange. And on top of that, you add that the media focuses on eye-catching headlines like this thing reproduces, this thing doesn't reproduce, and that sort of like removes the whole nuance out of the conversation. So our approach, we do not want to talk about paper X is reproducible or irreproducible. We do want to say paper X has a certain result that has a high or low level degree of reproducibility according to several reproduction attempts. Moreover, improvements have been made to the original reproduction package, increasing its reproducibility to a higher level. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to get out of this exercise. And to do that, our starting point, our framework, it's to think of smaller units of a paper. So we're trying to break a paper into smaller units, into scientific claims, where we're gonna center the reproduction attempts around a scientific claim. We're gonna ask reproducers to identify the claims. We're gonna ask a claim could be a causal claim or a predictive or descriptive claim. And we're gonna ask the reproducers to identify what are the main display items that support that claim. And here we're using the terminology of these display items to talk about tables, figures, or inline results. And each display item will probably contain several specifications. So we're gonna center the reproduction around the claim, and we will ask the reproducers to pre-specify what is the combination of claim, display item, specification that they will be most interested in reproducing. That's not going to prevent them from reproducing other combinations, but they will. We wanted to be able to record this beforehand. Let me stop there for a second and see if there's any questions. Okay. So a large part of this exercise is it's about standardization. We're not creating so much concepts or coming out with a new concept. We're just trying to provide one space where we're all going to try to agree, at least for the exercise of reproductions in the terminology on how to report them. So this is just a list of the terms that we need to provide a specific definition. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I will highlight a few that, for example, when we talk about a computational reproduction, it's what we'll be talking about, this idea of same data, same code, same result. And from now on, we'll refer to it as a reproduction. The term replication is going to refer to something different. It's going to talk about same methods over a different sample, a comparable sample, but a different one, and try to obtain qualitatively similar results. And we're not going to talk about replication ever again in this exercise. A reproduction package we're going to define as something that contains the information to all the materials to reproduce a paper. Raw data and analysis data, it's something that it's talked out there frequently, but we have to define a little bit more clearly and say that for our context, raw data is going to be whatever data set the researcher receives from the declared data source that they describe narratively in the paper. And the analysis data is going to be whatever data set is the last data set that they save before running a analysis. And also we needed to distinguish between these two types of paper. That is the paper that is reviewed somewhat quickly and where reproducers find that there's no materials and then jump into a new one, and the final paper that they will work on, which will be their declared paper. And all these definitions are going to be on our guidelines, and they are somewhat arbitrarily, and we made the guidelines open source so people can suggest modifications and discuss this type of definitions, and we want the community to participate and chime in into these ideas. So we're going to think about the exercise of reproductions in 4 stages, and that's the guidelines are organized around 4 main chapters, one for each stage. And the first stage is going to be scoping, and scoping is gonna consist of the stage where a student select or is assigned a candidate paper by their instructor. What they will do later on is they will check the platform, the ACRE platform, for previous entries and verify the availability of a reproduction package. And if there's no reproduction package, they will leave a record and repeat with a different. Sorry, we're having some family problems. My baby's crying a little bit. Give me one second. Okay, so if there's no reproduction package, then we will ask reproducers to leave a short record and then go look at a new paper. And once they have found a reproduction package, any reproduction package, we're not inspecting the details of the reproduction package yet, where anything that contains data or code or documentation, then once there is a reproduction package, we will ask students to declare the candidate paper. We will ask the producers to declare the candidate paper a declared paper, the paper that they will be working on. And only then we will encourage them to start reading it and select the claims and display items and specifications to reproduce. And when they go check out the ACRE platform, they will look at something like this on the right-hand side. They will see a little summary that there's going to be the name of the paper, the authors, the original reproduction package. If there is any, there's going to be a URL. If there's no, it's going to say no. There's going to be information if the authors have been contacted already. There's going to be information of the types of responses that have been received, the links to the reproductions package that has been updated by reproducers, and also information on whether or not the authors are available for further questions on ACRE reproductions. Once the candidate paper has become the declared paper, then we're going to move into the assessment stage. In the assessment stage is going to consist roughly of 2 parts. One where we will ask reproducers to identify all the elements behind their display items of interest. And once they have identified all that, we'll ask them to score the reproducibility of that display item. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
Yes, so we have an anonymous question from that is asking, so the platform is only for AAA journal papers?
Good question. The platform will allow any economics paper. We will have a preloaded set of papers that we will be loading. We have not decided yet if it's going to be from REPEC or ideas, but we will also allow reproducers to input the information, this information on any paper. Okay, so we have done the scoping. Now we're going to move into the assessment part. And the first part is going to be about identifying all the elements behind a display item. And again, all these things that I'm going to be talking about are things that should be pretty familiar to people who have been doing this type of exercises or guiding this type of exercises. But the main effort here is to try to provide some type of standardization. So we will ask reproducers to draw a clear connection between the raw data sources mentioned in the paper and the display item and the reproduction. We will start by the data sources describing the paper. So if you use the current population survey in the paper, you're going to say we use the current population survey of 2018, something like that. And that's going to be the data source. And then we're going to ask the reproducers to connect that data source to the raw data files in the reproduction package. So we're going to ask them to connect the data sources to the raw data files. Then we're going to ask them to identify the analytic data sets, describe briefly one-line description for each data file. And then we'll ask to inspect the code files, the code scripts, and record all the inputs and outputs that these files use. And with all this information, we are recording all this information in a standardized way. And then reproducers will submit this information into a tool that we're calling the ACRE diagram builder to generate a reproduction tree.
Sorry, Fernando,
yeah.
Before you move on with the diagram builder, Ojasvita is asking, who are the reproducers? Will they be selected as RAs or is it just voluntary?
Yeah, so the reproducers will be here students in a class that is doing reproductions as part of their homework. There will be students, this will be students in a graduate course that are doing this type of exercise. It's going to be students from undergrad that might want to do this as part of their undergraduate thesis. And also it could be independent researchers who are interested in conducting a reproduction. A reproducer for this exercise is anybody who's interested in conducting a reproduction using the ACRE platform. Okay. So, okay, we have identified all the elements. We feed it into the ACRE diagram builder, and the ACRE diagram builder is going to give you a reproduction tree. And a reproduction tree is going to be something like this. You're going to have at the end the display item. It's going to be table 1, figure 1, or something like that. And all the code and data all the way down to the raw data required to generate this display item. And reproduction trees can be complete or incomplete. This is an example of a complete reproduction tree. If there's missing data or there are missing components in the reproduction package, the ACRE diagram builder will generate an incomplete one and will suggest on how to identify the missing parts to the reproducer. But here we will start getting into a territory where the reproducer will have to make some subjective assessments, and this is where aggregating the different assessments of different reproducers will be beneficial, I think. Okay, so with all that, with all those components, now reproducers have been able to identify all the elements in a reproduction package behind a specific display item. They have been able to connect them from raw data to the display item. And with that, then we will ask them to score the reproducibility of that specific display item, table 1, figure 3, the one that they're focusing on. We will also ask them if they want to score specifically they want to score only specifically the combination that they specified at the beginning in the scoping section. And this is the levels of computational reproducibility that we have come up to. They are basically based on availability of materials, whether that starting from the availability of analysis code, analysis data, whether or not, once you have all the materials, whether or not you can achieve computational reproducibility using analysis data, then availability of clean code, availability of raw data, and whether or not you can achieve computational reproducibility using raw data. And the availability of materials is going to be described as partial or complete in a subjective manner by the reproducer. So level 0 is going to be the lowest one, where there's no materials at all. And then we're going to progress in starting from having only some code or all the analysis code, having some analysis data, having all the analysis data and the code, and then achieving computational reproducibility from analysis data. And our priors are that this is already a good standard to aspire, and we expect that a good amount of the literature is going to be it's going to achieve computational reproducibility from analysis data, but then we can go farther and apply the same idea all the way down to reproducibility from raw data. And all this presumes that the data is available and that anybody can access and reproduce the results. But as we know, roughly 40% of papers published in the last year, I think, in economics use some type of administrative data. So we need to incorporate that into our framework. And what we're doing is that we are reframing this scale. And when data cannot be provided, we're going to judge not the data, we're going to judge the instructions to access the data. So say that you use the data from the Ministry of Education on SAT scores, and you cannot provide it because that's confidential. We're going to ask you to leave a clear record on how to access that data. What's the name of the contact person? What are the procedures to access it? What are the data use agreements and things like that? And the main differences in the scale now are going to be in levels 3 and 4, where instead of access to data, we're going to judge it in terms of there's access to instructions for the data. Same idea for the raw data. And when it comes to reproducibility, we're not going to be able to test the reproducibility of a study, but what we will ask is for a proof of a third-party reproduction, and this could be ideally a outside organization like Cascade, for example, that does this kind of things and provides some type of third-party reproductions. But it could be also that we'll ask the reproducers to try to pin down an additional researcher that has been able to conduct a reproduction of the original study who was not part of the original set of authors. And again, these two levels, these two scales have a fair amount of subjectiveness in it. We want to leave it open for people to comment on it, for people to modify, to create suggestions. And I would like to also stop here for a second to see if people have any reactions around this. Okay, so we have done the scoping, we have done the assessment. Now we're going to move to the improvement. It could be an optional stage, but as we will see, it's fairly easy to do an improvement, and we want people to be able to record those improvements. So the improvements, we're gonna suggest 3 types of improvements in the exercise. The first, it's going to be a paper level improvement where we will suggest the reproducers to follow some of the practices that are being disseminated in the research transparency community to increase the reproducibility of work. Here, that could be things like using version control software, and this is what I will be talking about in the second part of in the hands-on section. You can also do things like improving the documentation, just annotating more the code, writing more comments, improving the indentation, making the names more intuitive, things like that. You can reorganize the reproduction package into a set of folders and subfolders that follow standardized best practices. There is a standardized best practice around a file organization, and that adds a lot of readability to our reproduction package. There's also a AAA reproduction template that reproducers could adapt the existing reproduction package into a new one. They could incorporate practices like literate programming. This gets a little bit more involved, but things like using Jupyter notebooks or R Markdown, where the reproducers could intertwine the code and the output in one environment, so you don't have to go read and then run the code in different stages. Also, reproducers can rewrite some fraction of the code using a different statistical software. Ideally, open source software like R, Python, or Julia, but any statistical software, it's already a contribution because it adds robustness and readability to the package. And also another element is the reproducers could set up a computing capsule. This is our innovations like Binder or CodeOcean, where the whole computing environment it's put in a server and can be accessed through the browser. So you don't need to have Stata or R or anything installed in your computer. You just go to a browser, see the reproduction package there, run Stata or R in the browser, and that generates the results from the paper. Types of improvements at the display item level. Here we're gonna label them as adding missing raw data. We're gonna we have conducted a couple of pilots around this, so I wanted to share a little bit of what people have done already when suggested to do something like this. For example, here's a reproducer who said that they found raw data temperature and relative humidity data that they brought back into the package. They could add some analytic data files. They could add some missing analysis code. So for example, here one reproducer says that they replace a broken wall bootstrap code with a updated code and command. They could also debug some of the code. Here the code was counting each group 4 times. So in the first round, so they fixed that. And the third category of improvement, we will we will ask reproducers once they are done with the exercise we have asked them, and we will ask them, okay, you have learned a lot about this reproduction package, very specific knowledge. For whoever comes after you, what kind of advice would you give them in how to improve them or where should they focus in terms of improving the reproducibility of this package? So here a reproducer from a pilot says, okay, I revised these very specific file extensions for code scripts to reflect he's asking the next reproducer to revise these code scripts to reflect the organization, the reorganized structure of the reproduction package. Here, for example, there's a reproducers who figure out that there were 2 figures in the paper who were not given a replication file. So then the next reproducer could pick up from there and try to figure out how to reproduce those. And also here are some recommendations for improvements at the display item level, where table 3 can be reproduced identically, starting from the analytic data files, but I was not able to reproduce the analytic data files due to lack of access to a specific software. But the code scripts and those data files are included in the package. So that, again, that's valuable information for producers pick up after. And once we're done with the improvement section, then we can move into the robustness checks. And this is gonna consist of mainly two sections. One is gonna be about increasing the number of potential robustness checks, and then to justify the appropriateness of these specific tests. And here for our robustness check, we're gonna start with a broad definition. We're gonna say that a robustness check is any possible change in a computational choice, both in data analysis and data cleaning. So that's gonna give us the universe of robustness checks, which is gonna be very large, potentially infinite. And then we're gonna narrow it down to the set of reasonable specifications. This here we're following the terminology from Simons and co-authors. And that a reasonable specification is going to be one that is a sensible test of the research question, is expected to be statistically valid, and is non-redundant with others. And we hope that the paper is going to be a subset of the reasonable specifications. But on the other hand, we're going to have a set of feasible robustness checks. That these are going to be the ones that reproducers are going to be able to. The more they can reproduce, the larger the feasible set. So on the one hand, we're going to ask reproducers to increase the size of the feasible set. Any type of robustness check. That's going to be one type of contribution. Another type of contribution we're going to ask reproducers to justify that a specific robustness check is in the intersection between reasonable and feasible. So we will ask them to describe the validity of the research question, one line justification of the validity, one line of justification of the how sensible is the test, and things like that. And one important thing to emphasize is that the amount of robustness checks, the extension of robustness checks, is going to depend directly on the reproducibility level. So if we're in level 1 where there are no materials, the feasible set is going to be empty. When there are some materials, but we cannot reproduce anything from the paper, we're going to be able to do some things, but we're not going to get into the interesting section for robustness checks. Once we can reproduce at least from the analysis data, we're going to be here. And once we get to closer to level 10, the amount of robustness checks is going to be contain the paper, and we're going to be able to go farther than that. That's it for the 4 main stages of the exercise. Before I move into the next part of the ACRE guidelines, I want to pause there to see if there are any questions. Okay. Another element that I outlined briefly at the beginning is that we wanna promote a constructive exchange between original authors and reproducers, and we wanna encourage this exchange, but in a constructive way. So in our guidelines, we have thought deeply about this, and we have come out with until so far 7 types of scenarios where reproducers might want to contact the original authors, and we're giving the template language to ease up this process. So there are scenarios for how to contact the authors when there's no reproduction package, when there's some items missing, when there's some things that are not clear, etc., etc. And just to give you an example of the flavor of these things, here's a template email for when there's no reproduction package, and here's an email for reproduction package for specific paper. Dear Dr. X, I'm contacting you because I want to obtain a reproduction package. I want to emphasize here some language that here I can will suggest them to say, unfortunately, I was not able to locate any of these materials on the journal website, Dataverse, or any other repository, or in your website. So you show that you have done some work. I will record my reproduction attempt on ACRE. With your permission, I will also record the materials you share with me, which would allow access for other reproducers to avoid repeated direct questions directed to you. Please let me know if there are any legal or ethical restrictions that apply to all parts of the reproduction, so I can take into consideration during this exercise. Though your cooperation with me and any future requests would be extremely useful, please know that this you're not required to comply. So again, we're trying to emphasize a constructive exchange here. Another example here, it's you can follow up when you need additional materials. So I saw your reproduction package. There are some specific issues that I need to resolve. And when we talk about specific issues, we really want the reproducers to be clear. So here's an example of a specific issue where we're using the reproduction tree. So here the reproducer will say, specifically, I'm attempting to reproduce output X, so table 1 or figure 3. I found that the following components are required to reproduce output X. So you're showing much more work. And then you can say, in this exercise, I figured out that this file is missing. These two files are missing. And I suspect that after you give me this file, I will need this other data set. So we're trying to be very proactive, very actionable request here. And also, we're trying to record the responses from this exchange, such that doing this will ensure that you will not be asked twice for the same missing file. That's an important element of this interaction. So that's roughly the guidelines where we are right now. But you can ask, okay, this is great, but what do I get as an instructor or as somebody who's guiding an undergraduate thesis on this? First of all, we're doing a little bit of work here in trying to standardize this project. So everything is set up in terms for deliverables and the terms of the structure for the exercise. It's fairly easy to grade. I'll show you how. It's easy to guide and oversee. Easy to set up as an independent study. It reduces we hope that it will reduce the applications of requests to authors, because we will keep track of that. And we hope that it will facilitate a constructive exchange of ideas, both when emailing authors, but also we're going to set up a discussion forum to discuss specific reproduction attempts. And also, I think it's important to emphasize that you will get the personal satisfaction that you are contributing to a public good to the profession. So I think that's important. In terms of easy to grade, it's of course not working, and I should have listened to Lars here when he said screenshots, but there will be standardized okay, right. Can you see it there, Alex?
Yes, this is
okay.
available.
Yeah.
Before we continue, we had a question about the exchanges with authors.
Yep.
So Flor Fontes is asking, what if the authors aren't cooperative? Will reproduction packages remain empty? And then when would reproducers be allowed to share their own reproduction package, even if it calls into question the reported results?
Yes. Okay. So let's take the first question. So if the original authors, for some reason, they cannot or they will not cooperate, first of all, we drafted language for how to follow up to that. So how to follow up when what if they don't share the materials for undisclosed reasons? What if they cannot share the materials for legal reasons? What if even they become hostile? We have also thought about that. We are providing guidance on how to respond to these things, but ultimately, if the reproducers, the original authors, do not want to cooperate, first of all, it's important to know that they can do it. They're not by any means forced to cooperate, and the only thing that the reproducer would be asked to do is to record the result. So if the reproducer cannot find the reproduction package, we will ask them to say, this paper does not have a reproduction package, and that's valuable information that will later on be displayed in the ACRE platform. And that's a mechanism. And the other question, what was it, Alex? I forgot.
So the other question would the reproducers be allowed to share their own reproduction package, even if it calls into question the reported results?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we will, the reproducers will be allowed to share the reproduction package. As ACRE, we will not be endorsing statements like this reproduction package unequivocally shows that this paper is not reproducible. We will endorsing statements like this set of reproduction packages suggests that this paper is not reproducible, or it has a low degree of reproducibility in a specific display item. Moreover, we are also discussing ways of how to, when a reproducer wants to disclose the result of an exercise, but in their position as an early career researcher, they might be feel threatening somehow. We wanna allow some type of anonymity when reporting those results. Hopefully this thing works now. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So and when I said that this is easy to grade, I mean that when the reproducer submits the results, for example, of the scoping stage, the platform could produce something like a report for problem set 1, and this would be, here would be the name of the student, the paper that they are reproducing, the link to the paper, how many entries exist in ACRE so far, some basic statistics, for example, number of claims recorded in ACRE for this paper. So different reproducers have assessed that a paper has 4.5 claims, and different reproducers have focused on a total of 3 claims. People agree that it's causal, but more important, this section where we asked the reproducers to summarize the claim that they're focusing on. So these are the reproducers' words on what's the main claim that they are assessing, and then we ask them what are the preferred specifications that either the authors or you think that best support this claim, and there's the estimate, standard errors, and here's the location. So with that, the instructor, if they are if they want to follow up, they can say, okay, so this estimate, it's in table 6. So for this case, they will go to table 6, and it's going to be here, and it's in location row 1, column 1, so it's right there. And the instructor can figure out if this is a good representation of the best estimate under study and things like that. So we think it's fairly makes it easy to grade. We also suggest some timelines for different formats of this exercise. From our experience, we have seen that some formats are, this could be a 2-week project as a homework, a 1-month project as a large fraction of the coursework. It could be a undergraduate dissertation or an independent study, 1 semester. And here we suggest some tentative distribution of the time to spend on each section. And that's the ACRE guidelines. And so far, all the results of this exercise, we have been tracking them using Qualtrics, and we want to move into a platform that will have the forms for students to fill in an open source format, but also a quick way to see the results and do some of the discussions. So this is, we just hired our developer, and we're going to have a beta version of the platform, hopefully within a month and a half. And the idea is going to be something like this. You're going to be welcome to the ACRE platform. That's going to be the stages. This is a little bit dated, but now we have the 4 stages. Here you're going to search for a reproduction package. When you go into contributing, as a reproducer, you will be guided through the sections of scoping, assessment, improvements, robustness, and all this process is going to be, you're going to have a username and a password. And then when looking at the results, as I said, we're going to be reporting, we're going to hope to report something like reproducibility levels of specific display items, and then showing how that might change over time, and also aggregating those results by subfields or overall fields in economics to see those rates over time. The timeline in terms of the platform and the project overall, we are wrapping up the guidelines. We have conducted a few pilots, and now we're ready to do our beta platform, a pilot with people outside of our organization. And we are planning on starting our beta, on having a beta version of the platform by mid-August and be done by December 19th. So in terms of, if you are interested, what I will encourage you to do is first go check out the guidelines. This is the website. And if you want to be part of our beta, here's a little form for you to sign in as an instructor, as a student, and things like that. And if you want to collaborate into the guidelines, these are the guidelines. So there's a website. You can go into different sections. For example, the assessment. Say that you have a different opinion on how to define computational reproducibility from analytic data. Here you can edit it. So you can click here, and it's going to take you to, you're going to need to have a GitHub account to do this, but it's going to take you to this editable page where you will be able to edit the content, and you will submit the content to us as a pull request, and we will review that content, and we're gonna have the ultimate say in what to keep and what to discard. But it's your contributions and your suggested contributions are going to be for everybody to see. So there's the beta, and I think that's it for in terms of the ACRE project. For acknowledgements, we want to acknowledge the support by Arnold Ventures for this project, everybody who has participated in the pilot so far. This involves the students at Ted Miguel's Graduate Development Economics course of the last 2 years, and Dina Pomeran's guidance of an undergraduate thesis of Mark Richter in the University of Zurich. And these very nice slides templates come from, I took it from a template by Grant McDermott. I'll stop there for now. Are there any questions, things that people would like to talk before we take a little break?
Yeah, so we have a question from Catherine Sills Carson. Said that any economics paper is potentially eligible for inclusion on the site. Does this include experimental papers, or are you sticking to econometric papers for now?
Any paper that has a computational analysis, it's eligible for the site. Anything. We're focusing mainly on empirical papers, so that includes experiments, but and observational, quasi-experimental data. But we also encourage work that has simulations, for example, computer simulations. That's something that is obviously computationally intensive, and we will encourage that type of submissions also to our platform.